Historically, a lot of the conversation that we've heard about the risks of machines and artificial intelligence and their interaction with nuclear weapons has focused on the decision to launch and whether or not the US president or anyone in the military would ever delegate that decision to launch to a machine. I think that is, at current time, very unrealistic. There's very little in US policy or practice that would indicate that that's actually the area to be the most concerned about. I actually think that some of the most likely applications of artificial intelligence in the broader nuclear weapons complex start much earlier in the process, long before a president or anyone has advised the president to launch a nuclear weapon, and instead start in what we call the left of launch procedures, the left of launch practices that start with intelligence collection, analysis, images from satellites or otherwise that might indicate some sort of change in what a United States adversary might be doing. The US nuclear weapons are set up to launch if there is a warning that our adversaries are launching against us. So anything that an AI tool or otherwise might do to falsify some of that early warning, or confuse or obfuscate or generally prompt some sort of miscalculation or accidental use of a nuclear weapon, is something that I think a lot about when we consider where AI might start to play a role in some of these broader nuclear weapons policy questions. So some of the things that I think about in this area include the risks of deepfake images, especially of high-profile individuals and national leaders, and misinterpretation of that, especially in a crisis scenario. Imagine that there is a crisis moment in relations between the United States and Russia, or the United States and China. If a false image of the Chinese leader or the American leader were to surface on social media or on television screens even, or individually an audio link to something false that was sent directly perhaps to a staff member or even the leader's devices, would that change the leader's decision-making? In the United States, it's only the president who ultimately must decide whether or not to use a nuclear weapon. They do not need to consult with advisors or members of Congress or anyone else. They also do not need to, although I would argue they should, very much consult with their intelligence communities. In the United States, the intelligence community, the civil servants who work there, have been working hard to develop and improve their policies and practices around AI-driven information, and to make sure that any time AI is used either to create information and they can analyze that and determine if it's true or false, or even if they use AI to analyze information, the US intelligence community is getting better at marking that information, conveying to policymakers that that information had AI somewhere along its origination path. But in a crisis, you can imagine a lot of information sort of flowing around on video and otherwise, phone calls and the like, at minimum providing some confusion to a national leader. There are a lot of things the US leadership, I think, should be looking at to make sure that AI does not trigger catastrophe. The first is the United States and China, its two leaders, President Biden and President Xi, actually in 2024 already agreed that machines will never, for the United States and China, make the decision to launch a nuclear weapon. Other nuclear weapon states have not signed on to that language. That would be my first recommendation, to diplomatically for the United States to engage with other nuclear weapon states around the world to make similar commitments. Beyond that launch decision, I think it's time to start thinking more about all of the information sources that our intelligence community and that policymakers and policy advisors get. Time to start thinking about how to make sure that that information is trusted, validated, and credible. Other steps that US policymakers could take include reevaluating, frankly, some of the structures that the United States nuclear weapons policies and practices were designed for. To what extent do our policies need to be updated or modernized to make sure that Americans remain safe and secure in an era of AI.